Now and focus on our key matter this morning, which is, of course, the latest call about restructuring. We've got our guests in Abuja. Makwe.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Joining us now to discuss the recent calls for restructuring and all the other matters surrounding it is the Governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you, Makwe.
Well, it's good to host you here in Abuja rather than Lagos. But, you know, these calls have been getting louder. Only recently, we heard eminent Nigerians, eminent elder statesmen, you know, joining that call. That was also just right after former head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, also added his voice to the call for restructuring. The All Progressive Governors Forum, have also, you know, joined that call for restructuring. But it was always in your party's manifesto. Why was it jettisoned?
No, it was not jettisoned. In fact, I think that this administration under President Buhari has done more in practical terms, not rhetoric, about federalism than previous administration put together. Those that talk about restructuring see it as largely political opportunism, in my opinion, rather than practical reality. And I'll give you examples. As state governments, we are now much more involved in economic policy making at the national level than ever. We meet every month under the auspices of the National Economic Council, and working together with the federal government, we chart directions of economic policy. That is part of shifting the federal-state balance. We have been involved in investigation of finances of the excess crude account. Things that were always hidden from state governments are now much more open. That is one practical step. Others include mining. The Minister of Solid Minerals, Excellency Fayemi, has done more in involving states in trying to exploit mineral potentials. Before this administration, licenses were issued for mining in Abuja, and you just see people drop in your state for mining. That has changed dramatically. Kaduna, for instance, has been working with the Ministry of Solid Minerals very successfully to exploit our gold and nickel resources, and the federal government has put the state more or less in the front seat along with the federal government to do this. That is restructuring,
but for a number
in real terms.
But for a number of people, that's not what they were looking for. What they were looking for is a situation where the federal government sheds weight. I mean, now we hear that the National Assembly is moving to decongest the exclusive legislative list. Yes. They believe that the federal government is too top-heavy and it should shed weight.
The APC agrees with that. As you said, it's in our manifesto. It's specific there that we are going to look at the exclusive list and do something about it. But what I'm trying to say is there are about 3 schools calling for restructuring. There are those that are just political opportunists. Okay? There are people that when in power did not believe in restructuring when they were at the federal government, but have now moved out and are calling for restructuring. There are those that genuinely believe that there is a need for us to look at our exclusive list and drop many of the items that are there. I'll just give one example. Yesterday at the Governors Forum meeting, we were asked to nominate 6 representatives to join a national minimum wage negotiating committee. National minimum wage should not be in the exclusive list. Okay, labor matters, yes, but you cannot fix a national minimum wage assuming that Lagos and Zamfara have the same income levels, and we don't have the data to be able to do differential minimum wage. So there are many issues arising from the unification decree of 1966 by Ironsi and progressive 3 years of military rule that need to be fundamentally addressed. And it is not an issue of conference or talk shop. We all know what the federal government should not be doing. The federal government should not be drilling boreholes in local governments. The federal government should not be doing primary health centers in local governments. But these things are all happening. Okay? There is a need for us to know that even the states, in an ideal situation, the state government should not be involved in primary education. It's a local matter. It's better, primary education is better managed at the community level. But because everything has broken down, we have Universal Basic Education Act that more or less places primary education responsibility on states. That is inappropriate. but perhaps understandable as a transitional arrangement until the local government's capacity picks up. These are very, very serious issues that should not be politicized, that we should engage in a national self-reflection to look at what has happened between 1966 and to date and roll back.
You say that there are three different groups of people who are calling for restructuring.
Yes.
But people will also say that restructuring means different things to different people. They totally are not just content with just decongesting, say, the exclusive list of the federal government.
It is the first step.
They want more.
When you decongest the list, you also must look at the revenue sharing formula. It all comes from responsibility versus what comes to take care of that responsibility, in my opinion.
So in the opinion of the Progressive Governors Forum, what precisely does restructuring entail for them?
For us, restructuring means first, look at the federal-state balance. Our constitution requires 2 tiers of government, recognizes 2 tiers of government, states and the federal government. Okay? We look at the balance of responsibility and power between the 2 tiers of government and ensure that what is best done at state and local levels is devolved to the states. And what is best done by the federal government stays with the federal government. Okay? That is the first step. Second step, once that is agreed, the necessary steps for constitutional amendment should kick in, because you need to amend the constitution. For instance, in our APC manifesto, we have committed to ensuring that we have state police, because we believe that a centralized police system is inappropriate for a country as large and as diverse as Nigeria. We can have federal police, just as in the US you have the FBI dealing with particular class of interstate and intrastate crimes, federal crimes. But most of the criminal law should be under the control of the states. So we should have state police. Now there are arguments that in the First Republic some regional governments abused the police. I would say that even today, state governments are in a position to use the police to abuse political opponents, because state governments carry the substantial burden of running the police in their states. Okay, so we need to look at this. So that's the third step. Get the balance, and then the second step. The third step is then to look at the revenue allocation formula and try to inject some kind of balance and equity tied to the responsibilities each tier of government is going to share. This is our conception, this is how we see it, and it is all articulated in our manifesto. And I'm happy that the debate has escalated now to a point that it is going to be seriously looked at, not just by the APC, but by every Nigerian.
But they also think, their thoughts that, yes, perhaps that would be one way to go, to decongest the exclusive list of the federal government, and also ensure that, revenue goes to the states to be able to meet those responsibilities. But then there's also the question of how the money is earned in the first instance. Some people believe that at the very heart of restructuring will be an economic restructuring. They think that, this Abuja ritual of going to, share money at the Federal Accounts Allocation Committee, needs to stop, that it ought to be the other way around, and perhaps that's the only way we will ensure growth around. What is the thinking of the APC governors in that direction?
We don't disagree. At one time, it was the regional governments that give the residual that runs the federal government. That is correct, but that was 60 years ago. Since then, a lot has changed. The fundamental structure, political and economic structure of the country has changed. And today, while we can move towards that, my objective as governor of Kaduna State is to take us where Lagos is, where 80% of our budget comes from internally generated revenue. That's where Lagos is. I was joking with Governor Ambode yesterday when we were talking about this restructuring thing, suggesting to him that Lagos should be the one threatening to secede from Nigeria because they don't need federation account allocation. All other states do. So we need to have a transitional period in which states will be compelled to grow. For instance, we could have a constitutional amendment that will put some hard budget constraints. What I mean by that is no state should be allowed to have a public service that it cannot pay from its internally generated revenue. for instance. Because part of the reason why we have huge bureaucracies in some poor states is because free money is coming. I do not believe that the size of the civil service in Kaduna State should be the same as Lagos, which should be nearly the same as Yobe State. Each state should look and cut its costs according to what it can afford. This monthly federation account allocation has made some state governments quite irresponsible. Okay, but this cannot be. It's not like on and off switch of the lamp in our room. This cannot be done overnight. We have to sit down, think through a plan and a timeline in which this addiction to federation account allocation will be resolved by compelling states to do certain things. Yesterday, for instance, at the Governors Forum, we were discussing the issue of minimum wage, and all the governors complained that the state governments accused of not paying salaries, when the reality is they don't have enough money to pay the numbers of people that they're compelled by political inheritance and other social pressures to employ. Many of us do not believe we need the number of people that work for the government. Okay, so if you want to adjust the wage up, okay, with the current levels of income that we have, the numbers must go down. But no one wants to hear that, and there are consequences of injecting a large number of people in the labor market. So it's a very tricky balance that requires an honest conversation and a timeline for which we all grow out of this addiction. It cannot be done overnight. It cannot be done overnight. Nigeria has been atomized into 36 states. That is not the ideal situation.
Let us also